now that Baldur's Gate 3 has been forgotten, I do think it's time to kind of emphasize, talk about an interesting aspect of this entire debacle that I noticed. Specifically, specifically the fact that like the CRPG genre is not as big of a deal as people make it out to be, right? Everyone said that Baldur's Gate 3 was one of the best games of the year. It's one of the best games ever made. It's a huge hit. It's some of the most concurrent players on Steam. They did all this, like it did this, it did that. It's super woke. It's ooh, so sexy. Like people tried like painting this narrative that like, oh, it doesn't have DLC. Oh, it doesn't have glitches and bugs, which is not true. Like the game is complete. Like it is 100% done. Like every part of the game is fully fleshed out, engaging, and incredible, which also is not true. The game peters out as it goes on. I think that's a real problem with a lot of these Western RPGs these days, where like developers just uh, front load all their content. So like YouTubers just play the first 10 hours, call it great, and then like they it slowly becomes known that the game just falls apart after that, right? Right. Right. There are all sorts of things about Baldur's Gate 3 that annoyed me, right? Like when it comes to like the weird marketing campaign and like the astroturfing and like the Metacritic score. Like there's all sorts of things to talk about, like in regards to this. But I think the big thing to take away from this, well, first of all, no, let's just not kid ourselves here, right? Baldur's Gate 3 is not that big of a deal, right? Like, let's not kid ourselves. Like, in spite of like the big push among YouTubers, among the media, among like Metacritic, among like Steam drones, among like the steampunks, like among these people, right? The astroturfing, like the game didn't do nearly as well as these people led you to believe, right? They didn't want to talk about sales numbers specifically. And the reason for that is because it got so thoroughly mogged by a number of other games, specifically The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, that it really wasn't even funny. Elden Ring sold like what, 4 times more, and like Zelda like sold about that much in like a month. Like Baldur's Gate 3, like the estimates I've seen indicate that like it sold about 5 million units, right, total. And that this game was in early access for a long time. People have been following along with with the development for a while before the official release. Like this isn't like a new game, so this game has technically been available for sale for quite a long time, right? And this is just like the full release of it, right? And like when you take that into account, like suddenly like the 5 million figures sold figure doesn't really seem all that impressive because they got a license to a classic PC RPG that people liked back in the day because PC gamers don't play anything good, right? They got the Baldur's Gate license. They made it degenerate. They got some really good like viral marketing campaigns. They tried like, oh man, look at this. You can have sex with a bear. Like they tried doing this. They tried doing that. They tried like doing everything except making a game that could stand on its own merits, right? Like the entire life cycle for like the hype period for Baldur's Gate 3 basically just amounted to like trying to go after fans of other games, right? Specifically Tears of the Kingdom, but I'm sure like other fans have been like attacked by Baldur's Gate 3 fans too. Like, bragging about the Metacritic score, bragging about like, the concurrent players, like, doing everything except like talking about the game itself. And, you know, to me, it just reeked of desperation, right? Like the CRPG genre clearly has a small, very small, dedicated audience that's willing to show for it and like promote it as like this big deal. But like so many people I know like looked at Baldur's Gate 3, saw like the camera angle, saw what you do in the game, saw like the D&D mechanics, and they were just like, no, like absolutely not. Right? Like there surely are people who like enjoy this kind of thing, just like how I enjoy something like Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, right? But when like you really look at it like objectively. When you compare it to like other games that are out there, games that like appeal to a wider audience, like you can see that this isn't a game that would appeal to the vast majority of people. It only appeals to degenerate D&D spurgs. People like Angry Joe, people like Noah Antweiler, people who don't actually like video games all that much, right? Those kind of people. And as a result of that, when you look at it from that perspective, like Baldur's Gate 3 is basically a licensed game that is carried entirely by the D&D name. It is carried entirely by the franchise. It is carried entirely by the mechanics and the lore. It doesn't do anything interesting or unique or new. It is just a generic D&D experience condensed into a video game that you can just play with your friends, right? There's nothing special about that, right? You would be better off buying D&D like in real life and just, you know, getting some nerds together and like playing with them, having some like real life counter monkey sessions, right? You know, like you can do that, right? Like why exactly would Baldur's Gate 3 is not competing with video games. Like Baldur's Gate 3 should be compared to like actual D&D, real D&D, like board game D&D with actual players. And when you look at it from that perspective, when you understand that Baldur's Gate 3 is not a video game, then you realize that like, D&D is objectively the superior experience, right? You realize that Baldur's Gate 3 needs D&D to exist, and without D&D would not exist. And as a result of that, Baldur's Gate 3 in and of itself is irrelevant. You are better off simply just playing D&D in real life in your mom's basement, right? That is the Baldur's Gate 3 experience. You are wasting everyone's time. You are better off simply just playing real D&D. So, now that we got that out of the way, these kind of games, CRPGs have to be some of the most overhyped genres in existence. I'm tired of people saying that stuff like Fallout 1, 2, New Vegas, uh, the original Baldur's Gate games, old BioWare games, like they're not all that impressive. Like it's remarkable going back to some of this stuff, going back to this glory age of like PC gaming and realize that all these games that were like praised by PC gamers back in the day are just complete like trivial, like boring, slow paced, just completely asinine, not worth playing today. Like it is remarkable seeing how many PC games back in the day that like nobody really remembers now, right? Like it's kind of a meme among the community, I think, that like Baldur's Gate 3, but I never played Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. Nobody has played Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, right? Like it doesn't matter that like it won awards back in the day or was kind of a big deal and like sold a lot of copies. Nobody remembers it because at the end of the day, the game was not that technically impressive. It wasn't that interesting. It didn't keep people around for the long term. And Baldur's Gate 3 is absolutely no different. Baldur's Gate 3 is carried entirely by the AstroTurf marketing campaign, the shills, and the YouTubers who are desperately trying to maintain the illusion that this game is a major deal, that this is a major success story for Larian and for gaming as a whole. But in reality, it's really not that notable. It's not even really a blip on my radar. Like I cared more about Hi-Fi Rush than this. That's how like low bar. That's how little I cared about Baldur's Gate 3. Forspoken looked better than this. Final Fantasy 16 looked better than this. Diablo 4 looked better than this. Um, Street Fighter 6 looked better than this. Like all of those games looked better than Baldur's Gate 3 ever did, right? Like I would never have even considered buying Baldur's Gate 3. Not in a million years. Even with this massive shilling campaign, like all these YouTubers trying to tell me it's the greatest game ever, even with me like watching footage and like watching streamers play it, I'm just like, no, right? Like I know that this game is not that great. Like I can tell just by looking at it. I could play it right now on my high-end gaming PC. I could stream it. I could, you know, uh, join in on the fun and like become a degenerate and like make some like crazy character in that weird character creation thing. I could do that. Like I absolutely could, but I won't. I have better things to do. I have other games to play. I have Tears of the Kingdom. I have Advance Wars 1 and 2. I have a Pokken Tournament I just finished. I just put it on the shelf, but it's back there. Dragon Quest Builders 2. Amazing game, right? There are Metroid Dread I'm ready to play again. Like all of these games are so much more worthy of my time and energy, time and attention than Baldur's Gate 3 ever will be. Like Baldur's Gate 3 is so irrelevant once the year is over, I'm probably not even going to remember this game existed, right? This game is so irrelevant, so pointless, so stupid that I will not remember this game after December 7th, 2023, right? Like it is going to be over, right? for better or for worse, like this game is becoming more obscure by the day. The AstroTurfing campaign is coming to a still coming to a slowing down, and people are going to struggle more and more. Like people are going to start like playing other games, realizing that Baldur's Gate 3 is not that big of a deal, and they are going to forget about it. Like Baldur's Gate 3 is doomed to obscurity, and nobody is going to remember or play the game ever again once the hype period is over.